Welcome to Hopewell Heights. I'm Steph, and today I'm going to be showing you how I make pasta. I just dropped my big kids off at Vacation Bible School in about 3 hours before I have to pick them up, so I planned on spending this time making as much pasta as I can make. I don't know how much that's going to be because I've never actually timed the whole process, and I usually actually just make pasta as needed. I have made bigger batches and stored it before because it's something that when it's dried properly, it can be shelf stable, but usually I just make it right at the same time as I'm making a meal. And it's actually not as involved of a process as I used to think it was. I was so intimidated by it for some reason, but it's really simple. It doesn't take that much time. So I think, if I am going to be making a meal from start to finish and it calls for pasta, it fits within an hour window. You do have to let your dough rest for a while in there, so that's the bulk of the time, but the actual hands-on pasta making just isn't that much of a process at all. Now, there are different recipes for making pasta, but the one that I use and love uses eggs, and this time of year I have a lot of eggs. Lots of eggs in the spring and summer, so this is a really great way to preserve those eggs in a way that is shelf stable. All right, well, my clock is ticking before I have to go get the kids, so let's get started. For this recipe, all you need is eggs, flour, salt, and olive oil. Although I have made it and forgot the olive oil on accident, and the pasta turned out just fine. So I guess really just eggs, flour, and salt would be fine. But I'm going to use the olive oil this time. You can roll pasta out by hand. I've done it, and it takes quite a long time, and I just can never get it really thin and uniform. So I have a pasta machine. I got it for Christmas. Was the best gift ever, and I use it all the time. I actually, it's a manual pasta machine. So I believe KitchenAid makes an attachment that goes on their mixer, but I don't have that. My machine is manual. It's an Atlas, and I will link it in the description. So let me show you that. I just keep it, it clips on your countertop or on your work surface, and I actually just keep it clipped on my counter at all times. I've got my I have an open pantry, and it's over here. I'll show you in just a second. And it's kind of just my workspace. I've got a lot of stuff. I've got my Berkey over there. So my pasta maker just lives on the counter over there, but I might have to bring it over here to be able to actually film the process. We'll see, but let me show you my machine before we get started, and then we will actually make the pasta. This is my Atlas pasta machine, and as you can see, it just clips right on the counter. It lives here in my pantry because I use it quite a bit. Like I said, I usually just make pasta fresh when I know that we're having that for dinner, but I might have to move it today to show you guys how it works. Okay, let's get started. So when making pasta, I just work right here on my counter. A clean work surface works best. If that bothers you, you can use a bowl, but I never use a bowl when I'm making pasta. So the first thing I'm going to do is take 2 cups of flour and just dump it right here on the counter. And then I'm going to use the bottom of my measuring cup here to kind of make a well in my flour. Now, once I have my well, I am going to add 3 or 4 eggs to this well. How many eggs you use will depend on the size of your eggs. So my eggs are not huge, they're just average sized. So I always use 4 eggs. But if you're getting jumbo eggs from the store, then just start with 3. And the thing is, this recipe is really easily adaptable. So, if you get going and you realize you need a little more flour, you can throw more flour in, or if it's looking really, really dry, you can even just add a tablespoon of water, or you can add another egg in and it'll be fine. I've had to do that several times. Oh, and before I add my eggs, I did want to tell you guys about my flour. So I buy flour in bulk. It is so much cheaper if you're going to be using a high quality organic flour to buy it in bulk than to go to the store and get little 5-pound bags. I think the last time I checked at the store, organic unbleached flour was $6 or $7 for a 5-pound bag. And I get huge bags of organic flour for $40. And I go through Azure Standard. I absolutely love them. They have such a wide variety of things, and I love shopping in bulk. It just makes my life easier. Plus, it's a great company. They have good good values. I know I can stand behind them and always get a quality product. I will link the flour that I buy from Azure in the description below. I picked out my eggs and washed them. I do not wash my eggs right away when I bring them in because eggs have a protective layer called a bloom that actually helps them to stay good at room temperature, and it's like an antimicrobial layer, protective layer. And I want that to stay intact so that I can store my eggs on the countertop. So I don't wash my eggs when I bring them in, I just wash them right before I use them. So these were just washed, that's why they look wet and shiny. I'm gonna crack all my eggs here. Next, I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt right to my little well here. And last, maybe about a half teaspoon of olive oil. I don't measure, but that looks good to me. Oh, and before I mix this up, I did want to tell you guys about my salt. So I buy salt by the bucket from Redmond Real Salt. Redmond Real Salt is pure salt that comes from here in the US, from Utah. It is another great company, and I love that I can get a huge bucket of salt because this is one of those items that is an essential if you're cooking from scratch. And once again, if you think about preparedness, salt is one of those things that you are absolutely going to want to have, not only to flavor your food, but salt is full of minerals that we need, that our body needs to function, and also salt's great for preserving. So preserving meats, preserving lots of things. For fermenting, you're going to need salt. So if you want to start buying things in bulk, flour and salt would be a great place to start. All right, so now I am just going to use my fingers to kind of mush up the eggs and start mixing this in. Once again, if this bothers you, using your hands to make pasta dough, because I know that's totally a thing. Like, I don't like handling meat, raw meat. That's just disgusting to me. I know that probably sounds weird because I will butcher a chicken and I'll do what I need to do. I just don't like it. So if you don't like it, then use a bowl, use a spoon, that's fine. But just know that you can absolutely just, use your hand to do this. This is, I guess, what you would call the traditional way to make pasta. You can see that my pasta dough is really starting to come together quite nicely. It's a little bit sticky yet, but I'm gonna keep kneading it and see what it looks like. Like I said, you can work with this. If it's not coming together like you would like and feel like you want to add a little more flour, just add a little more flour, a little bit at a time, like a teaspoon or a tablespoon at a time. It's easy to overdo it because this isn't a huge amount of dough, you know what I mean? It's a pretty small amount of dough, so you don't want to go adding things left and right like crazy, but just a little extra flour if you need it. I've even added an extra egg before once I got going, but that was when I started with 3 eggs because I thought there were bigger eggs, but I had to add an extra egg. So once again, this is 4 eggs, 2 cups of flour, teaspoon of salt, just a drizzle, maybe half teaspoon of olive oil. Okay, so you can see my hands are messy. It's all right, doesn't bother me. But my dough looks perfect. This is gonna be just right. You want to knead it really well. I finished kneading my dough. It looks really good. Everything's really well incorporated. I kneaded it for maybe 3 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. You do want to knead it really well so that it comes together and there aren't any big chunks of flour or anything. But you don't need to knead it forever, so it's not sticky anymore. You can see I can easily handle it, so that's how you want it, because when you're rolling out pasta, you don't want a dough that's falling apart. But now I need to let this dough rest for like a half an hour. I've forgotten and let it rest for like an hour before, but just here on the countertop, doesn't need to rest in the fridge like pie crust, because we don't have any butter or fats in there that need to stay super cold. So I'm just you do want to wrap your dough, though. That's really important because once your pasta dough starts to dry out, then you're not going to be able to roll it out as well. I've actually ruined pasta dough by not wrapping it well and then dried out, and I wasn't able to handle it. So I have these little shower cap plastic thingies. I'll link these. They're really handy. They come in packs of like a ridiculous amount, like 1,000, and they're super cheap, and I use them all the time. I put them over my banneton baskets when I'm baking bread, when I'm storing leftovers in the fridge. I just use them a lot. They're very handy. So I'm going to wrap my dough, set it here, and I am not going to clean this surface because, like I said, I have a few hours and I'm gonna try to make as much pasta as possible. So I'm just gonna keep this process going. I had some basil drying on my countertop, so I decided to chop it up and add it into one of the batches of pasta that I made. You can do this with any herb, so if you've got lots of herbs coming in from the garden right now and you're making pasta to make fresh or to preserve, then this is just another way to use those herbs. I had to take a few breaks to nurse the baby and put him down for a nap, and then I had 3 hours. I thought I had 3 hours total, but I wasn't thinking about the time it took to get back home from dropping them off and then the time to go get them. So it's really nursing breaks and driving, maybe like an hour and a half I have to work with. So maybe I overestimated what I could get done. But I have 3 batches of dough here and they've all been resting. Now I'm going to start with the first one I did, and I'm going to go ahead and roll it out. This is a very easy, quick process. I'm just going to put my clamp in here. Tighten it. There we go. That's it. So my handle, this fits in the side here. And that's all I need for now, because the first step when you are rolling out your pasta dough is to roll it out into big, long sheets. That's what you're gonna do first before you cut it. Now the attachment that I have here that we'll be using does 2 different sizes. It's all floury, because my hands are all floury. Wide or thin noodles. I really like a wide egg noodle, so that's probably what I'll do for most of my pasta, but I'll do a little bit of both just to show you guys the difference. It's very easy to use and very uniform every time. I have my first batch of pasta dough. It's been resting. It's been at least a half an hour. So I'm going to cut this in half before I start, and I'll actually be making 2 big sheets of pasta out of just this one batch here. However, they'll be really long sheets. And you'll see, I don't mind working with it. It's a lot to kind of hold out, but it allows me to work faster. So I don't mind dividing it in just 2 and having really long sheets of pasta that I then cut into smaller pieces. But you can cut this into 3 or into 4 if you want to do smaller batches through your machine here. I'm just going to divide it in half though. So unwrap it here and divide it in half. Now, this other half that I'm not working with right now, I'm gonna wrap it back up right away, because like I said, you do not want to let your pasta dough dry out. It dries out very quickly, then you will not be able to roll it out. It'll be just dry and flaky and cracky, if that's a word, but anyway. All right, we've got this piece here. This is what we're gonna start with, and I'm going to start by getting a rolling pin and rolling it just enough to where it will fit through my machine on the widest setting, because if you've just got a big ball of dough, then it's not going to fit through this opening here on your machine. All right, that's good. See, your dough shouldn't be sticky. It's not sticky. I didn't even flour my counter here. It's just very easy to handle. Got a thin edge. This edge is going to fit right in here in my machine. On the side of this pasta machine here, there's a little knob and there are numbers. It's kind of floury, hard to see. There are numbers. You want to start, so the lower the number, the wider this opening is here where you're going to be rolling your pasta. Always start on the 0. You want to start at the widest setting, so you want this to be able to fit in here, okay? So start there, and then we're going to work our way up as we go, getting narrower and narrower. I end on like a 6 or so. That's just my preference. You can see that closed up quite a bit, and that will give us a very thin sheet of pasta. I've got my machine set to the lightest setting, which is a 0, and I'm going to start rolling my dough through here. If it's still too thick on the bottom, just pinch it a little bit to get it started. Got a little bit of dried basil on this batch, that's okay. All right, here we go. So it's gonna start to flatten out quite a bit on your first pass, but we're going to run it through on a 0 2 or 3 times. Okay, that's my second time. And number 3. Now that's starting to look like a sheet of pasta, but we're not done yet, not even close to being done. So after that third pass through on a 0, then what you're gonna do is lay out your pasta and fold it in to the middle from both sides, and then from the top and bottom as well. Okay, so then you have kind of just a long, narrow roll there, and then I use my rolling pin. Probably just use your hand, I guess, to flatten it out, but I use my rolling pin to roll it back out just a little bit because it needs to fit back through that 0 setting. Your dough still shouldn't stick. It should come up very easily. Okay, I'm still on my 0 setting here. I'm gonna roll it just through like one more time on the 0. And then I'll start working my way up in numbers. So this will basically get, your machine will make your pasta thinner as we go up. So I'm gonna go up to a 1. Roll my pasta through a couple times on a 1. Okay, so you can see it's getting longer and thinner. Now that I've run this through on the 1, I did twice, just 1, 2, 3 times, whatever you think. The main thing is you want to work quickly so this doesn't dry out, and you want your pasta to look very smooth, like it's coming together really well. Now I'm gonna fold this over on itself. Just folded it in half. And I'm gonna move up to a 2. So now this sheet of pasta should start getting wider. See, there we go. So we're getting flatter and wider. Go through on 2 a couple times. Okay, let's go ahead and move up to a 3. I guess I just went through on a 2 twice. Kind of losing track here. But every time that I move that number up on the machine, my pasta is getting thinner. My sheet of pasta is getting longer. Okay, so I went through on a 3 times. I'm going to keep going up. I'm gonna go up to a 4, 5, 6. Well, I might skip 5. So I'm on the 4 now. You can see this is getting really long. So that's why I said if you find that it's hard to work with when your sheet of pasta is really long, then you can divide it into more than half. All right, I just went through once on a 4, and honestly, this is looking really good. It's even, it's thinning out really nicely. I'm gonna go up to a 6, skip 5, go through on the 6 and see how we look here. Okay, so then I'm gonna reach down when I'm about halfway through. I don't want that to, the part that's coming through, I don't want it to just pile up and stick together. So lay this part of the back. There we go. All right, that's perfect. So as you can see, I've got a nice long sheet of pasta here that is very thin and uniform, and it's ready to cut. But before I cut this into actual noodles, I'm going to flour both sides of this, and I'll show you how I do it. And here's why. If you're going to be storing your pasta, you want it to be shelf stable and you're going to be storing it. You don't want your pasta to stick together. So you want to make sure that both sides of your sheet are floured really well before you cut your noodles. If you're going to be cooking it right away, you can skip this step. You don't need to flour it, but this for me is going to be stored. So I'm going to do that. Just make some room here. Lay my sheet of pasta out, and nothing really sticks to this at this point, so I didn't clean my counter out because, like I said, I'm gonna get the kids, come back, and I'm gonna keep working. I wanna make as much pasta as I can today. So I'm just gonna grab some flour, sprinkle a little bit on top here, and use my hand to coat this entire sheet of pasta with flour. Really good. This will be a messy kitchen day, but that's okay. it would be really hard to turn this whole sheet over to flour the other side, but I want to flour the other side. So instead I'm just going to fold it in half. So now I've got my first half folded over, sprinkle a little flour here on this side, and then once this is finished, just scrape this flour off to use again back here, because I'm going to do the other side now. So unfold this, and now I'm gonna bring this side over and flour this side. You can see a little bit of that right there, a little bit of that basil that was on the counter and got into this batch. That's fine. All right, so that's good. Now I'm going to put my cutting attachment on my machine. Just slides right on. Let me make sure I've got it on the right side here. Now, before I start cutting my sheet of pasta, I'm going to cut this a few times, because when I dry this on my drying rack, I don't want the noodles to be this long. I want them to be shorter. And I'm also thinking about what I'm going to store them in. And I have Mylar bags that are 10 inches long. So I want my noodles to fit in those bags really well. So what I'm going to do is cut this in what, I'm not going to measure, but what appears to be about 20-inch sections. That way, each section of noodles can drape over my drying rack, and I'll have like about, you know, like a 10-inch section on each side, if that makes sense, so that the noodles will fit into my bag. So now you can see I have nice floured sheets, shorter sheets of pasta that are very easy to work with, and this is what I will be cutting into noodles to dry and store. I put my cutting attachment on. Now I'm going to move my handle because it was operating the roller part, so I'm just going to move it up to the cutting attachment, and I'm going to do this sheet in wide noodles. So it's the same process. All you do is slide your sheet down and start rolling. And in just a few seconds, you have beautiful, uniform pasta. So I actually ordered a fancy pasta drying rack, and I even posted about it on Instagram because I was so excited. But then a lady messaged me and she's like, you know what works really well for making huge batches of pasta is a clothes drying rack. And I was like, that's genius. So I sent my fancy pasta drying rack back, and I had been wanting a clothes drying rack anyway for drying diapers in the wintertime. So I figured this will be kind of dual purpose. If that grosses you out, well, I'm sorry, but I like things that have many purposes. So that is what I'm going to use. I'm going to just take my pasta that I just cut and hang it on my clothes rack to dry. All right, so I am all set. Pasta is hanging. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want it to be like, you know, you don't want your noodles to be piled all on top of each other. Just try to spread them out the best you can. Keep them around the same length here, because when they dry, what I will do is I will break them in half here at the top, and then I'll store all of this in a bag. And the bags that I have are about 10 inches long, so I just want to make sure that this all fits in there. So as you can see, this is actually a really quick and simple process. It's something that you can definitely just do as you're making your meal for the evening. But while you're at it, why not just add another batch and dry some? Like I said, it's shelf stable. Then you will have a quick and easy meal next time you want to make pasta. So I've got to go pick up my kids in just a little bit. The baby's still sleeping. I'm going to finish cutting what I have rolled out here. Maybe I will have time to roll out those other batches and cut those, but I will come back when I'm all finished and show you all of the pasta that I get done today drying on my drying rack. Now, it will take a day or two for this pasta to fully dry out. You want it to be fully dry before you attempt to store it. Any moisture is going to cause it to go bad a lot faster. It's not going to last as long. So it's going to take a couple days for this to dry. But once it's dry, I'm going to show you how I'm going to store this as well. I am all finished for the day. I didn't make pasta all day. I got interrupted a few times, so I didn't get as much done as I thought I would, but I still made 6 batches, and you can see it right behind me on my clothes drying rack there. I filled up a lot of it, but I still have a lot of room. So I think I could fit probably a total of like 10 batches of this particular pasta on here and let it dry that way. So now I'm just going to let it dry for a couple of days. It's already drying out a lot. You can actually see the pasta on the top there is starting to curl because it's getting dry. So I'll let it dry for a couple days, make sure it's totally dry. You don't, if you're gonna be storing this, you don't want it to have any moisture at all. And then I will come back and I will show you guys how I am going to store this pasta. My pasta has been drying on my drying rack here for 2 days and it's totally dry. In fact, it was totally dry yesterday after 1 day. And I know that because I accidentally bumped into my rack and a few pieces of pasta cracked and fell off. So I knew it was dry, I knew it was ready to go, but I figured I would give it just 1 more day to make sure that there was no moisture left in my pasta whatsoever, especially since I want to store some of this long term. Moisture is your enemy when we're talking long-term food storage. Usually when I make pasta, I just make maybe 1 batch and use it all that night. But if I ever have any left over, then I just store it in a Ziploc. Once it's dry it out totally, and then store it in a Ziploc because I know I'll be using it within the next couple of weeks or the next month. I don't think I've ever stored pasta for longer than a month. So I don't really have any experience on like how long it might last in just a Ziploc in your pantry. But for me, it's been fine for several weeks up to a month. I have 1 batch of dried pasta bagged up here in a Ziploc. I will just put this in my pantry and I'll probably use it this week. To cook this pasta, you're just going to do it the same exact way that you cook dried pasta that you buy at the store. Now, for the rest of this pasta, I want to store it long term. This is something that I'm definitely not an expert at. In fact, I'm pretty new at it. It's something we all should have been doing for a long time, but I think right now with seeing inflation and just a lot of the talk that is going around, preparedness is on the minds of not just myself, but a lot of people, and that's a good thing. We shouldn't ever be living in panic and fear, and so being prepared is not about that. In fact, being prepared allows us not to live in a state of panic and fear. So if thinking about preparedness makes you uneasy or nervous, don't think doom and gloom necessarily, but just think about the last time that you maybe ran out of something that you needed for a meal. Wouldn't it be nice to have that stocked up? That's the mindset that I have right now, is this is something I should have been doing for a long time, but right now I do have a little bit extra motivation to focus on preparedness, so I'm learning more methods for long-term food storage. I will actually have another video coming out next week where I show you guys some more things that I'm going to be storing long-term. But back to the pasta. So the rest of this pasta, I'm gonna be storing in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers and then storing those bags, sealing those bags and putting them in food grade buckets. I'll show you that whole process. The idea is that food stored this way will last a really long time, like years and years and years. Some sources say that pasta can be stored for 25 to 30 years this way, but it's a relatively new technology. I think Mylar bags have only been around maybe 50, 60, 70 years, not that long. So I don't know how many people have actually tried or eaten different foods after storing them that long in Mylar bags. But you know, I'm not too worried about 25 years down the road. I would love, however, to have a pantry that was stocked with like a year's worth of food. So that's what I'm focused on. And I'm very confident that I can get whatever food that I make to last at least a year storing it this way. This is a way that I can take all the eggs that we're getting in from the farm and dry them out and store them for many, many years without a freeze dryer. I don't have a freeze dryer. I think they're really cool. I would love to have one, but this is what I've got for now. All right, so let's get started. I am going to be storing my pasta in a Mylar bag. This is a quart-sized Mylar bag, and this is what I'm gonna be using because when I do go to actually use this food, I don't wanna have it stored in such big bags that once I open the bag, then I'm breaking the seal and I have to use it all right away. I wanna store it in smaller portions so that I can just go grab maybe 1 or 2 bags, open them up, and then cook whatever meal I'm making, and the rest of it stays preserved. So Mylar bags come in huge packs. I just ordered some different sizes. I will link them in the description. Right here, I actually have quart and gallon size Mylar bags, but they come in all different sizes. They even come in up to like 5 gallon sized bags. Then you could fill that bag full of like a 5-gallon Mylar bag, fill that full of flour, maybe put it in a 5-gallon bucket. The reason I went with smaller bags is, like I said, I want to be able to use smaller amounts at a time. The pack of quart bags that I ordered also came with labels. So the first thing I'm going to do is label my bags. I want to label them now before I fill them, because this pasta, if I fill the bags and then I try to write on these bags, it's gonna break the pasta. So I'm going to do that now. I'm gonna write what's in there and the date. I got the bags that have a Ziploc at the top here. So Mylar bags need to be heat sealed in order for you to store food long term. The zip here is just there for when you do break that seal. If you want to reuse this bag, then you can just zip it back up. So I'm going to go ahead and start filling these. Now, I have this little gadget here. This is totally unnecessary, but also very handy. Definitely makes it a lot easier to pack whatever you're putting in here, especially like if you're storing flour and you want to measure out how many cups of flour you're putting in a bag. You can just open your bag, put it in this little holder, and dump your flour in. I'll link all this stuff in the description, by the way, and I'm going to have a blog post with all of this detail as well.
Filling Mylar bags with pasta takes a little while longer when you hang it to dry than if you were to just twist your pasta into little nests. The reason that I don't like to twist mine into nests is because even if I flour my pasta really well, sometimes it sticks together when I go to boil it. So I just hang it to dry and take the extra time to store it away.
I've got this bag packed full of pasta here. Now I'm going to add a couple little 50cc oxygen absorbers to this bag, and over the next day or two that they are going to remove the oxygen from the bag. So just oxygen. They're not going to remove air from the bag. You might see your bag get a little bit tighter over the next day or two, but if you don't, then that's okay. So when you open up a pack of oxygen absorbers, you need to use them right away, all of them. Otherwise, they will suck up all the air and they'll go bad. They won't be good anymore. So I'm gonna put 2 in here. And normally I'd have my bags of pasta lined up, but I'm just doing this kind of quickly to show you guys. So I'm gonna put 2 of them in here, and the rest of them I'm just gonna put in a jar for right now until I can get the rest of my bags lined up and filled. So if you ever have extra oxygen absorbers, just put them in a jar and seal it, and then they'll be fine. So good to go there. I've got my oxygen absorbers in here. I'm going to zip this, and then I need to actually seal it with heat here at the top. A lot of people just use a straightener, like a hair straightener, and that works great. You can use an iron, you can use a hair straightener. I do have a food saver, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'll show you guys how we do that.
I've got my bag of pasta ready to seal. Now, I do not want to vacuum seal this because it would crush all the pasta in there, and plus, I've got my oxygen absorbers in there, and I've got the zip, so I'm not going to vacuum seal it, but I want to seal it up here, above the zip, not below. I'm sealing above, and then when I go to use this, I'll just open it, and then I can still reuse this and zip it and unzip it. If you heat seal your Mylar bag this way, remember just to push seal, not vacuum, because there's nothing to vacuum since you have the bag zipped already.
Now I have a good heat seal on my Mylar bag, so this bag is good to go. It's good to store, but I am going to put this in a 5-gallon bucket because the Mylar bags help to keep light out. That's the whole purpose of sealing food with oxygen absorbers in a Mylar bag, as opposed to just vacuum sealing food in the clear vacuum seal bags. Those are translucent, so light is just kind of like moisture, the enemy of preserving food. It's going to make your food break down a lot faster, any light that can get to it. And that's why it's really important too, when you're choosing Mylar bags, that you go with thicker ones. These are extra thick, I think like 9.4 mil, but you want at least a 5 mil Mylar bag. So even though no light is going to get to this pasta, mice can still chew through these bags. So to protect against that and any pests or bugs, I'm going to store this in a 5-gallon food grade bucket. I've got just the one in here now, but you can see I've got lots of room to add more bags in here, and then I can just get in here as I need one of these bags and pull it out. I will link these 5-gallon buckets, but before you go and buy food grade buckets, check your local bakery or deli or grocery store, because a lot of times they have a ton of food grade buckets and it's cheaper to just throw them away than it is to send them back. So they just get tossed. So they, a lot of times, are more than happy to just give you buckets. So that whole process took me maybe 5 minutes, and I've still got a lot more pasta to do, but you can see once I set up like an assembly line and I've got lots of bags here ready to fill, I put my oxygen absorbers in, run them through the sealer and get them in the bucket. It might take 15-20 minutes, but then I've got a whole bucket of pasta here that is good for many, many years. Like I said, I've read 25 to 30 years. I don't know for sure if that's true, but I know at least for the next few years, which is all that I am really concerned with. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please be sure to click subscribe. I make videos on motherhood, homesteading, and life here on our farm. And like I said, next week I will have a video on long-term food storage for lots more items. I am going tomorrow to pick up my Azure standard order, and I've got lots of bulk items that I'm going to be storing for long-term. So I'm really excited to make that video and share it with you guys. Have a good day.